Neil deGrasse Tyson shouts out, affirming the most confounding and unfortunate revelation made by Explorer in the previous 10 years. A revelation that researchers were not the slightest bit ready for, since the Explorer sent back this upsetting information from space. Mainstream researchers have been not able to rest, and everybody is strolling under a strained climate. Analysts, researchers, and architects have been mixed from their stations to battle these baffling objects that Explorer just spotted. We don't have the foggiest idea where these odd objects are coming from or where they decapitated. However, what we truly do be aware is that we have seen in no way like them before. What are these baffling articles that were as of late found by Explorer? Join us today as we examine these replies in Neil deGrasse Tyson's Explorer. Explorer 1 has recognized 500 obscure objects passing by in space for nearly 50 years. Now, Explorer 1 has been cruising through the highways of space, investigating the profound domains that ground-based telescopes have been avoided from seeing, and revealing disclosures that leave our mouths wide open in shock, a result of virtuoso personalities that stream in overflow at the Johns Hopkins Stream Drive Lab. Explorer 1 has been the brilliant courier to the strange domain of intergalactic space. This engineering masterpiece has opened our eyes to the awe-inspiring marvels that exist in our universe. In a new improvement, Neil deGrasse Tyson has affirmed that Explorer has distinguished 500 obscure objects floating calmly in space. This news came as a shock to mainstream researchers, shaking researchers as everybody began poring over the information got by Explorer 1. Something weird was blending not too far off, and it was hard to address this foaming riddle that had stunned even the greatest of researchers. Since Neil deGrasse Tyson affirmed this disclosure, various translations have been flying in the air in an attempt to frame a distinctive picture that makes sense of this mystery. Assuming it had been another shuttle that communicated the sort of befuddling information that was as of late sent from space, researchers might have questioned the legitimacy of the information. However, on the off chance that it's Explorer 1 we are discussing here, the space test that has been cruising through the hot ways of room for very nearly 50 years now and has surpassed our assumptions like a patient who beat disease, Explorer 1 has surpassed researchers' extended life expectancy of 3 years to spend north of 45 years in space uncovering history-making revelations. At the same time, the most fascinating part about this famous story is that Explorer is composing this example of overcoming adversity from a very far separation from the Earth. The last time researchers checked, they saw that the space test was 145 billion miles from our planet, dashing away in space with no sign that it would diminish its speed at any point in the near future. Scientists say that the space test has been going at a rate 3-6 times the distance between the Earth and the Sun each year. This is one pill that researchers have seen as a piece hard to swallow, because normally one would have expected the space test speed to have declined incredibly given the lifespan of its process in space. On a close look, it appears Explorer 1 is bound to be the butt particle with regards to this story, and it has shown evidence of this yet again with its latest findings. It was very much like every single day for researchers when Explorer 1 hammered an invigorating news on their appearances, one that would stick in their recollections for a very long time. Explorer 1 had staggered on some baffling articles passing by in space. This revelation was impromptu, which makes sense of the underlying disarray of stargazers when they looked over data showing that around 500 obscure objects had showed up from nowhere briefly. We had close to zero insight into the presence of these objects, and in the next second, we had researchers breaking their cerebrums in search of a response to this puzzle that nature had arrived on their laps. Researchers were in a fix, and the fault could be followed to just a single liable party: Explorer 1. Amusingly, researchers moreover knew that the answer to disentangling this mystery additionally laid on the weighty shoulders of the space test. At first, when fresh insight about this disclosure broke out, a few researchers considered the probability that it might have been a botch. They felt that the time of Explorer may initially be finding it also, thus it could send wrong information back to us. Assuming we choose to walk on this unfurling way, it appears like a conceivable clarification given the reality that Explorer 1 was sent off as far back as 1977, that is very nearly 50 years of dynamic assistance in the interest of mankind. One can anticipate that the shuttle's PCs would have become exhausted and begin to glitch, contracting in their obligations, and sending back poor-quality information to the ground group. As appealing as this account sounds, researchers have advised that we shouldn't step there, since it would be a slap on the caring soul of the explorer. Regardless of the cruelty and capricious climate of room, Explorer 1 has consistently produced eye-opening information about our universe. In spite of the rushed presumptions of cynics, the space test has kept up with its long life on account of its double XSPC frameworks. Like its twin, Explorer 2, Explorer 1 came equipped with two arrangements of order subsystems, Flight Information Frameworks, FDS, and Height and Articulation Control Frameworks, ACS. This has been the mystery power behind the rocket's whole battling soul with regards to charting through space and revealing disclosures. The overt repetitiveness made way for consistent changes among frameworks and the capacity to activate lethargic PC parts, accordingly saving their life expectancy. While planning Explorer W, the engineers back on Earth concocted a plan to assist the space with examining augment proficiency. This expected that the test's instruments would need to depend on designed rationale. They were taking no chances when it arrived at this area since they were disabled because of time imperatives and limitations in power financial plans. The electrical engineers chose the instruments would need to be created utilizing worked on frameworks power the executives that relied upon designed rationale. Along these lines, Explorer's PC frameworks involve 6 locally available PCs coordinated as a dispersed framework with 3 double redundant matches. Having overcome this obstacle, researchers needed to confront the next tall block facade in their manner, which was keeping up with the frameworks. This intimidating level was overcome by concocting a continuous power the executives plan. Here's where it gets a bit tricky. Power the board involved supporting the functional capabilities of Explorer's PC frameworks, and if we are being straightforward, this is a challenging errand to manage given the restricted power assets accessible on board the space test. It was an instance of sending a tracker into the profound wilderness to chase after wild creatures with just a bunch of blades. In any case, researchers tracked down a way around this issue by concocting several measures to preserve and optimize power use on board Explorer. A true illustration of these power the board measures that engineers concocted is the particular shutting down of insignificant frameworks. Engineers were constrained into making this hard decision. Consequently, they utilized a fundamental way to deal with distinguishing and deactivate parts or subsystems that are not vital for the space apparatus' essential mission objectives. We see proof of this when we take a quick view radiators associated with certain instruments that must be turned off. These radiators were originally designed to maintain the instrument at specific temperatures so they were worked or performed at optimal. However, the story must be changed because it greatly reduced power utilization aboard Explorer. This reduction in the shuttle's power utilization comes with a gradually increasing influence. An extension of Explorer's lifespan. It's a win-win situation for everyone. Also, we ought to bear in mind that this decision to shut down unnecessary systems isn't taken lightly. It is a scheduled activity that requires careful evaluation of the compromises between power preservation and the scientific objectives of the shuttle. Whenever such a decision was taken, all hands must be at hand. Experts and researchers had to sit together and evaluate the impact of deactivating specific systems on the quality and availability of scientific data. Emotions weren't having an effect on everything here. It was completely straightforward in view of the current facts within reach. The team was driven by the want to expand power efficiency while keeping up with the fundamental functionality of the rocket so it could keep on gathering vital information about our universe undisturbed. Specialists and researchers the same believed nothing should impede Explorer's way when it came to revealing the profound mysteries locked away in secret domains of room, mysteries that the universe has been avoiding us throughout recent centuries. Anyway, specific power decrease isn't the main way that NASA architects are keeping Explorer above water and working ideally in space. They had one more secret weapon up their sleeves, which they needed to put on the table for the advantage of the space apparatus. Versatile power the executives. Closed by versatile power the board, researchers and architects needed to come up with power the board systems that are adjusted to the ever-changing states of the rocket's climate. For example, as Explorer 1 ventures farther away from the sun, the accessible sunlight-based energy experiences a plunge. We would concur that this is an issue. Anyway, the architects came ready as they made up for this developing danger by guaranteeing that the shuttle changed its power use appropriately. This versatile methodology is a triumph on the piece of NASA engineers and researchers since it guarantees that the accessible power assets are effectively assigned to help the test's key tasks and information move back to Earth. Curiously, the upside news doesn't end here. As there have been progressing specialized headways and overhauls in power, the board which have accounted for architects to refine and upgrade the power frameworks of the rocket throughout the long term. A nearby look at these upgrades would uncover that they include more proficient power dissemination, further developing battery charging strategies, and progressions in power regulation and control. The execution of thoroughly examined and arranged power the board strategies has opened an invigorating entryway for engineers. It has made it workable for specialists to expand the functional life expectancy of the Explorer 1 make close by its twin Explorer 2. This is a big success for the logical local area and the world at large. The cautious portion and the executives of power assets have equipped Explorer 1 with an essential strength needed to continue to investigate the profundities of room unhinged, unafraid of disappointment. The space apparatus has encountered an interesting logical excursion, one where its basic frameworks stay useful notwithstanding its advanced age. Consequently, it can communicate significant information and give eye-opening insights back to the ground group on Earth as far as might be feasible. If we think back on the way that the rocket wasn't intended to endure more than 5 years, we would perceive how much this is a big accomplishment worth celebrating. The credit for this super exhibition of Explorer 1 lays exclusively on the ever-centered hands of researchers and engineers. We can't resist the urge to acknowledge their yield, less quest for guaranteeing that the space apparatus keeps on working ideally. They invest a great deal of energy in examination and evaluation of what continues in space to keep up with the rocket's ideal usefulness. Anyway, as much as we praise their endeavors, we shouldn't disregard that space is a capricious climate. Anything can occur there without for advance notice. Some unexpected occasions come calling, regardless of how set we up may be. This new revelation of 500 obscure items has a place with this gathering. In spite of our comprehension of what happens in profound space, anything set us up ahead of time for the stunning news that Explorer 1 brought our direction. From where researchers stood, all they could see was that Explorer 1 was frightened shitless because it felt as though these obscure articles were going its way with plans of going after the test. As soon as researchers got the terrifying report from Explorer, everybody was thrown into a condition of profound concern. An informal, highly sensitive situation was proclaimed in the academic local area as specialists and engineers considered on a response to this Mao issue that unfolded solidly in their faces. This revelation was way out of the common content. At best, the Explorer Create was simply intended to interface with meteoroids, space rocks during its sojourn through space, so we can grasp their underlying disarray at the point when the Explorer Create coincidentally found odd articles, protests whose beginning we couldn't put any place in the catalog of space projects we have compiled over the years. Actually, we could say that these obscure objects had emerged suddenly. The really befuddling part was the possibility that the objects could be going our way. Anyway, in the weeks that followed, researchers soon put this possibility to rest, never to rise once more. But they had a harder nut to deal with. They needed to answer the question, why did the Explorer send such stressing information in any case? When specialists detected the upsetting information from the Explorer, they made it a point to term it as an oddity. According to researchers, the expression was an awesome depiction of the issue that the space test had brought to their doorsteps. They informed the public how the sign came in out of the blue and with no unmistakable approach to sorting out what was wrong. What happened was that Explorer began sending puzzling tottery information back to Earth. As if this wasn't befuddling an adequate number of, they were more stunned by the way that the shuttle stayed receptive to orders from mission control. How would we make sense of these uncommon readings despite the fact that the shuttle was answering normally? The just hiccup in this story is that there was a slight postponement in correspondence. Generally, researchers found it confusing that the Journey AC receiving wire stayed highlighted the Earth, guaranteeing that it proceeded to get and execute guidelines effectively. According to researchers, this occasion was going out to be a marvel, one that made them absorbed the stream of stresses. There had to be a logical clarification for this anomaly. They repeatedly contemplated how might the shuttle at some point be practically ordinary yet be sending back mysterious information to Earth. The story simply wasn't more to include researchers baffled when they saw that the inconsistency hadn't set off any issue location frameworks. This was truly astounding on the grounds that these locally available frameworks are intended to initiate when peculiarities are recognized. These frameworks are intended to usher the specialty into an experimental mode that permits architects to research and analyze the issue. An alternate story worked out during this puzzling occasion as the issue insurance framework remained put and Explorer 1 proceeded with its activities without entering experimental mode. At several points, researchers and specialists had to squeeze themselves to be certain they weren't in a fantasy. Scientists were in a fix without any thought of where to go to. Anyway, the ice of disarray that characterized this disclosure before long began to melt as researchers continued to hack at it looking for a response. Their endeavors paid out in the end since they soon showed up at the brilliant entryway they had been keeping watch for. Scientists found out that the irregularity was connected back to the Height and Explanation Control Subsystems Axe. It worked out that the Axe was the guilty party behind this troubling occasion. As per Explorer's plan, the Axe was entrusted with exactly arranging the space test and controlling its movements. Imagine the shock on researchers' faces when they figured out that the Axe had been sending telemetry information through a locally available PC that had stopped working years back. They couldn't accept their eyes as they found that this obsolete PC, which shouldn't have been engaged with information handling, had by some remarkable stroke of destiny found its way into the telemetry transmission process. Consequently, this prompted the debasement of the information being sent back to Earth. This onboard PC had somehow made itself a hindrance in the transmission chain of information from Explorer to Earth. Anyway, what researchers still required a solution for was the reason this upsetting occasion was occurring in the first place. For what reason did the peculiarity need to spring up from nowhere? Despite the fact that they had gotten some help from the new discoveries, their brains actually wandered towards the possibility that the Explorer might have seen 500 obscure and perplexing objects passing by in space. In an attempt to finally lay this chance to rest and reassure researchers formulated an exit plan. This book arrangement included training the actors to divert telemetry information to the fitting working data. They chosen to go with this action in light of the fact that it was viewed as okay and their bet ended up being right toward the finish of the day. Although the arrangement was effectively executed, they were confronted with another test, which was the critical time postponed in correspondence. During this examination, they were a bit stressed by this outcome. However, at that point, it wasn't something that would merit losing their sleep over. When we recall the immense distance that exists between the Explorer Create and the planet, the whole is so huge that it is quite reasonable to anticipate some defer in correspondence. With a 145 billion mile distance between the ART and our dear planet, it takes a critical measure of time for radio signs to go through from both areas. This is how the correspondence between the two players plays out. At whatever point the Mission Control Group at NASA's Profound Space Organization sends an order to the Explorer, it goes as a radio transmission at the speed of light. The Profound Space Network DSN is a broad organization of gigantic radio receiving wires in a logically manner situated across the globe that makes it workable for NASA to keep up with correspondence with space apparatus investigating the furthest reaches of our planetary group and beyond. The essential goal of this network is to work with two-way correspondence between the Earth and profound space missions close by leading radar and radio stargazing perceptions to broaden how we might interpret the universe. At whatever point the Profound Space Organization is communicating information from the Explorer to the Earth, it frequently utilizes its channel A. Furthermore, it typically utilizes frequencies of 2 to 3 GHz. When we require another once-over at this, we find that while sending signals from the Earth to Explorer 1, a recurrence of 21 GHz is utilized, and it happens at the speed of light. As much as this going at the speed of light appears to be